Now, from CBS News Miami, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Welcome to Facing South Florida. I'm Jim DeFede. Today is day 34 of Donald Trump's second term. 34 days of mayhem. 34 days during which he pardoned the January 6 rioters who assaulted police officers, unilaterally declared the United States would own Gaza, that we were taking back the Panama Canal, making Canada the 51st state, buying Greenland, and renaming the Gulf of Mexico. 34 days of letting the world's richest man and his crew of lost boys run wild through the federal government, firing thousands of workers and exposing imaginary fraud. $50 million in condoms to Gaza? Not true, but it sure went viral. Did USAID fund a transgender opera in Colombia? No. It also didn't pay Hollywood celebrities to visit Ukraine or cater Chelsea Clinton's wedding. Is there government waste? Of course there is. And sure, some cuts are needed. But there is no precision to what Elon Musk and Trump are doing. It's just an indiscriminate wrecking ball with no regard for the consequences. The people working to fight the spread of bird flu? Oops, they were fired. The people responsible for making sure our nuclear stockpile is safe and secure? Whoopsie, fired as well. Folks manning the suicide crisis lines for veterans? Sorry, but they were bounced too. Let's face it, it's been a lot, and none of it has made the cost of living better for Americans. In fact, it's only getting worse. This week, I spoke to Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz about it.
I think the chaos is the point with the Trump-Musk Doge bag effort here to take a sledgehammer to every agency to allow Musk and his Doge bag minions to rummage and rifle through your personal private information, the personal private information of individuals, your Social Security records, your IRS records, the records of businesses and nonprofits, to indiscriminately fire people, freeze spending, eliminate programs, and even if it's illegal and certainly unconstitutional, that's besides the point, because the point for him is to do so much damage and undo so many different vital programs before a court can act and try to make him put it Humpty Dumpty back together again. And in the meantime, you have literally millions of people who are going to be gravely or are in the process of being gravely harmed, from the veterans that are being fired, over 1,000 of them at the VA, to the folks who are losing their jobs, that are dealing with the most sensitive and important healthcare research at NIH, to the 1/3 of veterans that are employees of the federal government. And by the way, the frightening mistakes that they're making in the process. They fired the whole team, quote unquote, accidentally, that actually oversaw our nuclear weapons cache. They fired the whole team, quote unquote, accidentally, that actually answer the phones for the suicide prevention hotline for the VA. I mean, this is dangerous stuff, and people are going to die, and it's not an exaggeration.
I heard, somebody try to make sense of it from this standpoint and why there hasn't been greater public outrage yet. It was a moderate Republican pollster, somebody who has, whose work I respect, said that in interviews that she's been conducting with focus groups, that while they may oppose individual type actions, like for instance, the pardons of the January 6th folks, which seems so long ago that it's hard to even remember that there was that blanket pardon given to everyone in January 6th, including those who assaulted police officers, that while they may not like individual items that the president may be now doing, what they like is two things. They like the sense of a president in action, following what they consider to be not really seeing Joe Biden. So they like the aggressiveness in terms of a president doing something. And they also have a mindset that essentially says, well, when a new owner of a company comes in, that they think if it's a failing company, you stop everything you're doing to try to assess where the books are, where the money is going, all of those sorts of things. And that's really what's being at play here, is that this is just sort of what happens when business leaders come in, they freeze everything, and then take a good look at it, and eventually those that are working will come back online. That is the mindset of some who are supportive of this. How would you address that?
Well, I think there's a reason that Trump's numbers are starting to drop, particularly when asked whether or not people think that he's going too far, and that he should be allowing Elon Musk to run rampant through federal agencies and indiscriminately turn off funding and fire people, and break the law. And I think the umbrella that we have to look at this under is that what he ran on and what people elected him to do is to make life more affordable. I mean, none of what he's doing is bringing down the price of groceries or housing or energy costs like gas or or electric bill. As a matter of fact, inflation is starting to tick up. So the unpopular things that unpopular impact of a lot of these things, like that there are drug trials at NIH that people participate in to be able to make sure that we can make more progress in fighting cancer. I mean, the impact that has on real people is critical. The firing of over 1,000 people at the VA, just when we already know that the VA doesn't have enough employees to begin with. In fact, Jim, the subcommittee that I'm the ranking member of funds the whole VA in appropriations, and the VA just notified us that they have a $6 billion shortfall related to direct PACT Act healthcare funding that they need Congress to make up the difference for. We're talking about people who are running roughshod over the Constitution, which the average person probably thinks is maybe not that offensive. But I had a press conference this week that whether it was people who were losing their Medicaid and their disabled daughter or their child was not going to be able to get health care anymore, or the pediatrician who came and stood and talked about the well care visits that children wouldn't be able to be brought by their parents to receive, or the veteran who was in the military for 30 years, whose colleagues were fired, and who now there's less care that's going to be available at the VA. What we're trying to do is spotlight the impact of these decisions on real human beings. And that's when I think we're going to start to see, as we are already, his popularity decrease and frustration and anger beginning to mount.
When did government workers just all become vilified and become the enemy?
When Trump and his MAGA Republican cronies wanted to make enough room to give more tax breaks to their multimillionaire and billionaire buddies. I mean, that's what this is all about. This indiscriminate cutting, this isn't about government efficiency. This isn't about, we need to run government more like a business and we need to, kind of check the books and make sure that we get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. What they're doing right now is exactly what you saw them do when they passed a budget out of the House Budget Committee last week that has hundreds of billions of dollars in proposed spending cuts, including on Medicaid and healthcare funding and funding to take care of the most vulnerable people. And all of that is to make room in the cap so that they can expand the tax cuts for the wealthiest, most fortunate Americans and make the ones from 2017 permanent. That is what this is about, plain and simple.
I want to talk about Gaza and what's happening there. This notion that it's essentially a real estate issue now for Donald Trump, that you can have a move where you just basically remove 1.5 million Palestinians, force Jordan or Egypt or other countries to take them in, and then just, I guess, develop it as great waterfront property. It's comical on its face. It's not even the notion that it could be done. But I'm wondering if it also suggests that the Trump administration has all but formally given up on the idea of a two-state solution. And is that where U.S. policy is now going towards, is that we no longer believe in a two-state solution?
What is the most disturbing is how dangerous that proposal is. And first, let me just take a step back and say this was a devastating week for Israel and for the Jewish people across the globe, with the return of 4 dead bodies, 2 of which were the Bibas boys, Kafir and Ariel, who were 9 months old and 4 years old when they were taken into captivity, and their mother, Shiri. I was in the region, if you remember, Jim, on October 7th, and in Israel on October 10th, part of the first congressional delegation to go to Israel and meet with hostage families and people who lost loved ones. And the Bibas kids were the first people I talked about on the House floor. And I've spent over 500 days with the hostage families fighting hard to keep the attention and focus on bringing all of them home. And I can tell you what is the most disturbing and ridiculous about Donald Trump's, proposal, really, that he keeps repeating and doubling down on is that to suggest that we're going to just cleanse Gaza of everyone, not allow anyone to return, any Palestinian to return, and make it the Riviera of the Middle East, is that it puts Israel at more risk, Israelis in more danger. It foments anti-Semitism, and I would even say fans the flames of inciting more terrorists, more recruitment by Hamas and Hezbollah and people who already hate Israel. So that's not the direction that we should go. We do need, first of all, the hostages must all be released right now, get them home, and then, the ceasefire hopefully holds, but Hamas has to be eradicated and the threat to Israel has to be eliminated.
Do you believe the two-state solution idea is now dead?
Well, I think Donald Trump is certainly trying to present it as dead, and very surely the Israeli people aren't even entertaining the notion of whether that's possible until all the hostages are home, and until they're certain that their security is assured, and that's understandable. But when we can talk about what's next, that is why the Arab world, along with Israel, and I am one of the new co-chairs of the Abraham Accords Caucus in Congress for this 119th Congress, Jim, and I'm really looking forward to continuing to lean in with the other Arab nations to promote normalization agreements between Israel and Saudi Arabia and other countries. And we can do that by making sure we bring these leaders to the table in the aftermath of the resolution of hostages coming home, ceasefire holding, eradication of Hamas and the threat they pose.
When we come back, we'll talk about Gaza and what happens if Trump decides he's not bound by court decisions designed to keep him from violating the Constitution. Stay with us. Welcome back. The same week he literally referred to himself as king, Donald Trump called Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky a dictator and falsely claimed it was Ukraine, not Russia, that started the war. Trump also made clear that if Zelensky didn't sign an agreement turning over 50% of Ukraine's mineral rights to the United States, he would withdraw his support for Ukraine. I asked Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz for her take on what is happening with Ukraine.
In my experience, there's a lot of tools you can use to advance diplomatic solutions and, the resolution to conflict. But extortion is not one of them. And Donald Trump seems to be thinking that extorting a mineral agreement that would give access to revenue of the sale of minerals or access to those minerals in exchange for our continued support or as a payback for what we've done to assist a democratically elected government that was attacked mercilessly and unilaterally by Russia. And then, of course, you have Trump's inevitable projection that he always engages in, where what's really going on, he projects onto, someone else. So, for him to suggest that Zelensky started the war and that he is a dictator and that, he's refused to have elections is actually what happens in Russia. If we're going to take the side of Russia, now, and we're going to abandon our democratic allies in Europe, and the United States will no longer be a reliable ally to democracy, then Trump is creating a very dangerous situation that will jeopardize our own national security. He's sadly mistaken if he thinks this isn't going to eventually come back to bite us and bite us hard.
Let's talk about immigration for a moment.
Well, let's be clear about where we were before Trump took office and on January 20th. There was a 90% drop of illegal border crossings under Joe Biden, particularly in the last year and a half or so. That is because of the lawful pathways that Joe Biden established, including granting TPS to Venezuelans, Nicaraguans, Haitians, and others. And the parole program that he created that allowed those same individuals from those countries to apply for parole, fly into the United States, have a sponsor, and be able to work. Also, lawful entry. The type of unlawful entry that we're talking about that was dangerous and there was a precipitous drop for is in between border crossings. So when you present yourself at the border crossing and you ask us for asylum, that is not an illegal crossing. That is going through the normal application process to apply for asylum. And I mean, he seems to be counting people who come to the border to present themselves for asylum as individuals who are breaking the law, which they are not. And he is deporting many of those. He has ended the parole program. So that adds a whole bunch of people who are no longer going to have lawful presence. Ended TPS that was granted to Venezuelans by President Biden towards the end of his administration. And thankfully, there's an organization that just filed a lawsuit against the Department of Homeland Security to reverse that because the way he did it was unlawful. But who they are, the difference between the deportations that were occurring under Biden and Trump is that Biden was actually deporting the most dangerous and criminals, and Trump seems to be deporting mostly people who are just unlawfully in the country, and some who came in lawfully, and just before their case was adjudicated, they're deporting them, including a plane load of Venezuelans that included 2 members of the Venezuelan military who defected and who they sent back. And what do we think is going to happen to them under Maduro's regime, brutal regime, with 2 defected members of the military? Grave harm is what they'll return to.
When you look at some of the things we've talked about and go back to November, I think about the Arab Americans in Michigan, for instance, who all came out in support of Donald Trump because they believed he would be a friend to even the Palestinians in the Middle East. When you think about Venezuelans, the few 100,000 Venezuelans who are in Florida, who are legally in Florida, have the right to vote, are U.S. citizens, and voted, now seeing family members or relatives or friends, being rounded up and deported. What do you say to those folks who are now waking up and realizing that the Donald Trump they voted for is not really the Donald Trump that they anticipated, even though Democrats had told them at the time, this is exactly what you can expect if Donald Trump is reelected?
Well, I would tell them what my mother and grandmother told me as I was growing up, when it came to how you approached people who let you down. Spit on me once, shame on you. Spit on me twice, shame on me. And so we need 3 Republicans in the House of Representatives to vote for legislation that's been introduced by Democrats to stop Donald Trump and Elon Musk from being able to rummage around in our private records, and to stop Donald Trump from indiscriminately deporting people, ending TPS, preventing people like my Venezuelan friends and neighbors here in West Venezuela from being able to keep their families safe and not be sent back to the brutal narco regime that Maduro runs, who is an illegitimate dictator that lost an election. And we need to make sure that people understand that the next time they have an opportunity to support candidates, that they support candidates that will actually live up to their promises, not stab them in the back. which is exactly what Donald Trump and Elon Musk are doing, and the MAGA Republicans in Congress who are the lackeys that are following them.
You've talked a lot about earlier some of the court cases. I think that's what everyone is sort of holding their breath on because, you know, I think the best way I've heard it is the red light on the dashboard, if you have an old style car, the red light on the dashboard is sort of blinking but not full on red yet. And that would come about if the courts were to rule and Donald Trump just decides to ignore the rulings of the court. Because we all know courts don't have any real enforcement power. You know, even the U.S. Marshals, whatever limited ability they have, are part of the executive. So do you think we're headed to that level of a constitutional crisis where Donald Trump just ignores rulings?
Yeah, and it would not surprise me if he goes that far, because he's certainly given every indication that he is interested in pulling as much power into the executive branch. The tweet that he put out the other day that suggested that you're not violating the law if you're trying to save, quote unquote, save the country. He posted a picture of himself with a crown on and declared himself king. Those are all big, huge red light warning flashes that indicate that he believes in an executive branch that is all powerful and that doesn't have the need to actually listen to the check on power that our founding fathers put in the Constitution with the legislative branch, which is essentially has a Republican majority that has thrown their hands up and is giving and is cowering in the corner, afraid of Donald Trump and standing up to him, and a judicial branch that won't be afraid to stand up to him, but that he just may ignore if he thinks he can get away with it. But we have to, the press is going to be critical, the attention, sunlight is a disinfectant, and we have to make sure that there's enough pushback. People who are concerned, as deeply concerned as I am and as many of my constituents are, we have a portal that we just posted, Democrats across the country in the House of Representatives, that allow people to upload and share their stories about the personal impact of the spending freezes and the firings and the illegal actions that he's been taking. And we need to make sure we publicize that as much as possible so people know. So people know that individuals are being gravely harmed by these decisions, including, Jim, the 100,000 people that are on Medicaid in my district that are going to be subject to losing their health care, 50,000 of whom are children, a quarter of whom are over 65 years old. These are vulnerable individuals that, again, the motivations of Republicans, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and MAGA Republicans are solely to give tax breaks to millionaires and billionaires, and they are doing nothing to do what they promised to do, which was to make life more affordable around the kitchen table for Americans on their gas and energy prices, their housing costs, and their groceries. They've done nothing to do that because they don't care.
We'll be right back after the break. Well, that's all the time we have today. If you have any thoughts or comments, feel free to contact me at jdefede@cbs.com. I do enjoy hearing from you. Thanks again for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.